Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting Live. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, and I am on the road still. I am actually at the JB Duke Hotel and Conference Center in Durham, North Carolina. But I'm using StreamYard, which allows me to do my broadcast anywhere that I am. So whether you're watching on whatever platform you're watching on, thanks for being here. I am excited to bring to you this gentleman here, Alex Susskind, who is the professor of Food and Beverage Management and the senior director of academic programs at the Nolan Hotel School, which is at Cornell University. He's been there for 25 years and brings his experience from work in restaurants and his work as a consultant to fuel his teaching and active research program at Cornell. So welcome, Alex. Thanks for being here.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here. I hope you're doing well.
I am doing well. Yes, I'm ready to go home and sleep in my own bed tonight after being on the road for 10 days, but all is good. So how I originally reached out to you to talk about food and beverage and what the impact of food and beverage is coming out of the pandemic onto meetings and events. So can you share how the pandemic has changed the demand for food and beverage
Yeah, sure.
in our industry? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So obviously, when things shut down, there was zero demand for food and beverage surrounding those things, and we're actually getting back to a point now where the demand is coming back. But what's happening is things are changing a little bit. Conference behavior is a little bit different. Where there used to be again a lot more like communal events where all the food basically was consumed, all the food and beverage was basically consumed together, other than coffee breaks and things like that. And now what a lot of conference organizers are doing, because the demand for this is increasing, is coming up with what I like to call grazing strategies, where they're providing opportunities for food and beverage at multiple points throughout an event, so that you're not just sitting down. That yes, that will be a part of the programming, but it's not going to be the central part of the programming anymore, where food and beverage becomes just something that is accompanying almost every part of it. And they make it so that you might actually feel like checking your email when you have a 15-minute break, but you want to grab something to eat. So organizers are putting together little grab and go stations, much in much more convenient ways than they had in the past, where every once in a while there would be an event that had a grab and go bag or something that was part of the programming. But now they're building those types of things in, and not just a little basket of granola bars that you can grab, but actually creating unique types of things that are more suited to maybe some more solitary interaction or limited interaction, where you might have a client meeting, or or a prospective client meeting, or a meeting with a colleague, where you don't want to be part of a larger event. So that's a trend that we're starting to see in force that wasn't really present, let's just say 2019, 2020. That wasn't the way that we were setting up these types of things, but now that has to be a part of it. Otherwise, you're leaving guests behind, and you see them walking out of these events with a plate of food, like, oh, okay, they don't want to be here in this particular room. And then you go and watch what they're doing. They're actually just checking their email. So why make it difficult for them to do that? You should build that into the program so they can, they have that flexibility. That's one of the main things that I'm seeing.
Well, and that kind of plays into a little bit too, like lunch breaks. Like, you don't want to do a keynote, not lunch breaks, but do a keynote session every single time you're having lunch, because you're losing that capability of checking emails or networking.
Right, exactly. And so giving people an opportunity to get the sustenance they need, right? Everyone needs a cup of coffee or a cup of tea at some point during the day. Everyone needs to eat something. And so this grazing strategy just lets everyone kind of get what they need, a little bit more on their own timetable, within the larger, within the larger schedule that you have. You need a keynote, you need all these other types of breakout sessions. But again, you don't want to tie someone down when you can give them a little bit more flexibility. And that's what people are demanding, not just in the conference space or the meeting space. They're demanding that in their personal lives and in other parts of their work lives as well. So this is just a global phenomenon, or at least I guess a Western phenomenon that we're starting to see more consistently.
And I mean, and that's looking at it from a restaurant perspective, a hotel perspective, conference center, across the board, and trying to also then provide them the room designs or the spaces to do that in as well,
Yeah.
not having to go back to my room, on the 17th floor, you know. Yeah.
Right. And, you know, the great thing about most conference spaces is that they really are a blank canvas, if you think about it. And so that the way that you set up any, the way you set up any room is going to be different for each group that comes in. You know, some groups want a registration table here, but another
Hmm.
group doesn't want the registration table there. They want it somewhere else. And so the fact that you have that freedom and flexibility every single time you create an event or a meeting, and it could be different every day. In other words, you could have a 4-day meeting and you can have a different setup pretty much every day if you wanted to.
Oh yeah.
And
Hmm.
that hasn't, I mean, that capacity has been around forever, because if you go into an event space when you're getting ready to book it, it's basically a clean slate, and it all
Right.
depends on what equipment they have, and the type of equipment they have, and operators now are investing in different types of things to give a little bit more flexibility in the design and the setup of the room. So that's absolutely something that's
Yeah.
happening and changing a little bit too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and you may have answered this a little bit in the last question too, but the guest value proposition, because we were talking about, when I titled this, Reimagining Food Service to Create a New Value Proposition. So can you talk about what that value proposition was pre-COVID and what you're seeing now?
Sure. I would, and I'm going to quote the great operator, Ray Kroc, if you will,
Okay.
from
Hmm.
McDonald's. And basically, McDonald's basically had four things: quality, service, cleanliness, and value. And
Okay.
those are four things. Those are four value drivers that pretty much any business deals with on the face of it. And I think quality is something that has changed quite a bit. Guests' perceptions and demand for quality has changed, where consumers now are excited about going out and spending money. I mean, post pandemic, we're getting back to this. They're excited about going out and spending money and investing in these types of experiences. But what they're willing to do now, which they were less willing to do prior to the pandemic, is they're willing to pay a little bit more for a better
Okay.
quality experience, right? So less volume of stuff, but better quality. So, for example, having really, really nice, finger food, as opposed to just, and again, this is a terrible example, if you can forgive me, but, really nice, maybe sliders and mini tacos and, some type of, food production like that, as opposed to a cheese tray or a veggie tray,
Hmm.
or something like that. So the quality expectations have shifted, and guests are willing to pay a little bit more, even with inflation. And we can talk a little bit about that as
Yeah.
well, even with the price pressure that everyone's feeling. But the price pressure isn't just affecting restaurants; it's affecting everything. So normally restaurants are under a lot of pressure, to keep their prices low. Uh, and that pressure still exists, but there's lots of price pressure in every domain of our economy. So it's less of it's a concern. Don't get me
Right.
wrong, but it's less of a concern that just affects the restaurant side of the equation. That the cost of doing business for everything has gone up. Just putting gas in your car costs more. Buying eggs costs more. So consumers are getting that at home, and they're used to getting that, or at least whether they're okay with it or not, they're in the process of getting that, anytime that they consume retail products as well. And when I say
Yeah.
retail, I mean restaurant consumption, banquet consumption, meeting
Hmm.
events, that type of stuff. And so the quality part, and then the other thing that if you just let me go on for just one more minute,
No,
the
you're
other
good.
the other thing that has changed significantly is the cleanliness idea, right? Prior to the pandemic,
Hmm.
right? If you talk to any savvy operator about what they do, they say, yes, cleanliness is really, really important. And we want cleanliness to be an invisible factor in our service
Hmm.
delivery. We want our restrooms to be spotless. We want the floors to be clean. We want the tables, to be clean. We want the mirrors to be dusted and shiny, right? We want all that stuff to happen, but we don't want the guests to see us doing it, right? In other words, it's kind of like the
Hmm.
Disney model where you show up at the park every day and it's like it's a brand new park every day, right? You don't see the work that they did overnight to make sure that that happened, right? And that's the same thing
Right.
that used to happen in restaurants and hotels. But now guests want to see the cleaning, they want to see the wipes, they want to, and maybe they don't want this directly. I'm just going to use it as an example, but they want to smell the bleach, right? They want to walk in and they want to say, this place is clean, right? And where
Hmm.
previously they didn't want to see any of it, they just wanted to be clean. Like when you walk into a bathroom, you don't say, oh, this is the cleanest bathroom I've ever seen. But when you walk in and it's dirty, you're going to be, oh, well, that's a dirty bathroom. So the expectation is it's clean. But now when you
That's true.
walk into the bathroom and you see someone scrubbing something or cleaning something or wiping something, you're like, okay, they're on this, right? So we're
Right.
making cleanliness or sanitation and health and safety a priority that's more visible. It was never less of a priority, but it's more visible now. And so that connects to that value proposition that, when guests see that, it makes them more comfortable. And then the last part that I just want to build on is the service dimension too, where our business is an inherently in-person business. And uh, the service delivery now requires that our service providers understand a little bit more about some of the nuances that drive consumer behavior that are different. People are more comfortable being by themselves now or being away from others than they ever were before. And so it's really important that service providers recognize when you see two people talking together, they're choosing to talk. When you see someone sitting alone, they actually may have a really good reason for doing that. And
Hmm.
you may not want to get in the middle of of changing that or adapting that. But say
Right.
if you see someone sitting alone and you're a service provider, you offer them something. You try to help them to see if you can help enhance whatever experience they're having. They may very well just be like, you know what, I was sitting in a group of people, I just don't feel comfortable sitting around. That one person that was coughing is making me feel
Hmm.
uncomfortable, and so they're sitting down and they're and so the
Yeah.
service providers need to be more aware of some of these nuances that are different than they were, because consumers are paying attention to different things in a way that they hadn't previously. They
Right.
may have been a part of an important operational model, but they were maybe de-emphasized just so that the guests could experience things in a different way. Like I used to call it invisible service, where you're giving your
Hmm.
guests everything they need, but they don't know that they don't know that you're doing the work for them. And
That's a
that's a
good point. Yeah.
where cleanliness is still not, where cleanliness now is something that they want to see directly in front of them, but that other type of service can still be invisible and can still enhance the service, like filling up an empty water glass before being asked. Like
Hmm.
you're happy about that, right? But you don't
Right.
think about it, right? Those are the kinds of things that matter and that you should focus on, in addition to making sure that you're delivering on the price value relationship on top of that.
And that's really interesting because, and a couple things in there. I'm like, I thank the people who clean the bathrooms. I'm like, thank you so much for in public restroom areas, right? Like, thank you for what you do. It's really, I value a clean bathroom, and your job is a dirty job, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for that. But when COVID hit, so 3 years ago, I gave a presentation, a webinar about food safety. And I asked a group of meeting planners, I'm like, how many of you asked about the health inspection score of
Mm,
your caterer, your food, and your hotel, right? When you're booking them? And 71% of them said never.
mm,
And so it kind of goes along that line of, we expect this of you,
right,
but we never questioned it,
right.
right? And now we want to question it.
That's right, and
Yeah.
there's some municipalities that have addressed that in different ways. If you ever, I remember the first time I was in LA before this happened in New York City, where they had the grades, like the A, B, C grade,
Hmm.
right? So when you walked into a restaurant, you knew how it was graded by, and they have that in New York City now. They have that
Right.
in other places, and so that's messaging and signaling to students who wants to walk into a C, a
Yeah.
C-rated
Hmm.
restaurant. Like it's almost like would you go if your doctor's office had that same rating, like A, B, and C? Like, oh yeah, I need a new kidney. I'm going to go to that C doctor over there as opposed to
Right.
the A doctor. I mean,
Hmm.
who does that? But it's important information, and because health and safety has become more important, those are the types of questions now that people are asking because, again, they want to see that cleanliness. And I stayed at a Hilton hotel the other day, and one of their standards now is they have these wipe stations all over the place, so that when
Hmm.
you get ready to go into an elevator, there, right there's a bucket of wipes and a garbage can, so that you, as you're getting ready to go up the elevator, you can grab a few wipes and you can, take them to your room. And, those are like little things that,
Hmm.
5 years ago, no hotel operator would have done that. It's like, we don't want our guests to think that they need wipes for anything. Our hotel is clean. We clean it every
Exactly.
day. But now that little gesture or that little station makes people feel more comfortable, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
those are just some nuances that have emerged that we're still trying to process from
Right.
a consumption standpoint and from an operational delivery standpoint.
Right. Exactly. Okay. So in a few minutes ago, you mentioned food costs. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't know if I had mentioned it to you, but one of my meeting planner friends is like being charged like $278 for 1 gallon of coffee after tax and gratuity. Um,
Wow.
exactly. So is coffee really that expensive? But what are you seeing with the cost of food and beverage, and how are properties managing that?
Yeah.
Because you did say that restaurants want to keep the cost low, but when you're looking at the meeting planning side, it's like the prices are
Yeah.
skyrocketing.
Yeah, so again, a lot of operators, you have to take it holistically. And what they try to do is they try to find ways where they can basically reassign costs, right? Or reassign revenue or margin from one item to another. So this is just a blanket generic example, but you're probably paying 50 to 70% more for chicken or eggs, right? Those
Hmm.
products are just more expensive than they were, significantly more expensive. You can't raise your prices per se on those items by 50 or 70%. But what operators are doing is they're raising the price of things on other elements that support it in smaller ways. So that bottomless pot of coffee that you're going to offer, that you used to offer, now you're basically selling it by the hour. So instead of them getting $250 for coffee for the whole day, now you're saying, oh, it's $250 for 2 hours worth of service, right? So then what you're doing is you're reassigning costs. And again, coffee, again, I can't tell you the exact price per cup, but it's
Right.
probably somewhere around 10 cents. And you want to go up a little bit if you're adding some cream or oat milk or a little bit of sugar in there, but it's really not that expensive. And so the margins are really good on that kind of thing. And because it's a product that you want to have, around and available,
Right.
that's not going to be something, oh, well, actually, no, I don't want to, I only want to have 1 hour worth of coffee, right? If you have 1 hour worth of coffee at an event, you're probably going to have basically, after 1 hour, you'll have a bunch of really grumpy and or sleepy people, right? And so
Hmm.
so operators are savvy about putting things in to raise the revenue and to raise the margins that will help compensate for some of the other things that they can't necessarily. So they can't charge you, they can't charge you $100 for a chicken pasta dish,
Right.
where they can raise the price on the coffee or the beverages or the bottled water or the other things where you consider those almost necessities, and that will help defer some of the costs that they take in these other domains. And obviously the cost of labor has gone up, and so
Hmm.
their operators are always trying to find ways to, as a last resort, raise the prices for the consumer, the end consumer, the guest, and try to balance that. So in the end, as long as their profit and loss statement looks good at the bottom, how they get there is a journey, let's just put it that
Right.
way. And particularly when you see all the supply chain pressure that
Right.
that we're facing, and that's kind of one example.
Yeah. Well, and you brought up labor, and somebody mentioned, or actually somebody in my Facebook group asked 2 weeks ago, if I'm assessing a venue, for an event that I want to do, how do I understand or get them to let me know if they're paying a living wage to their employees, especially in the culinary side of the aspect of that. So do you, and I know there's a big discussion now about the service charges, and service charges are going up, and how is that service charge being delineated? Is it going to the hotel bottom line, or is it going to the staff? So do you have any insight on that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a big challenge with that. So the first question that you asked about the living wage thing, and each individual meeting planner has to have and client has to have their own view on these things and their own belief. The federal minimum wage is $7.75 an hour. Right. So in theory, right, if you operate in a state or a county that doesn't have a higher wage rate, you can't fault the operator for having 775 as the rate that they're paying their people. Now, that being said, you as a meeting planner can make a decision, and again, this could be state by state. I don't want to pick on any particular
Right.
state, but state X, if they have a minimum wage of $15 an hour, and state Y has a minimum wage of $7.75 an hour, you as an operator, if that's an important feature for you, if that's something that's important, then you shouldn't do business with that group or that state or that county or wherever that wage is, if that doesn't meet your value proposition or your value set, right, as an operator, as a as a service provider. Right. So that's the first thing. And the second part of it is really just finding a way to make sure that you're paying everybody fairly and equitably. Those service charges by law in most states come, if it's listed as a service charge, it's actually money that goes to the operation. It's not necessarily going to the servers. Now, you as an operator can decide whether you're going to do that or not. So you can charge, in a lot of bills, there's a gratuity line, and then there's a service charge line, and the service charge is most like, let's just say the service charge is 15%, and then you also ask your guests to pay an 18 or 20% gratuity, which goes directly to the servers. If it's listed as a gratuity, it has to go to the service staff, however you're dividing that up among your team. And so, so the idea is basically operators should use those things strategically and be clear with their guests. There shouldn't be some top secret, you're paying 15% and I'm not going to tell you what I'm doing with it. If I was an operator and you asked me, I'd say, yeah, we use a service charge. We use it for a couple of things. We use it for this, we use it for this, and we use it for that. And then that way you as a guest or a planner can make a decision. Hey, well, you know what? Operator X charges this and does this, and it doesn't fit my value set, and I'm not going to do business with them. Or you may say, oh, wow, I didn't realize that your service charge actually did this, this, and this, and that's great. So my view on any of these things is transparency, full transparency, and any operator that is not transparent with you regarding what they do and how they do it is probably not someone that you want to form a long-term relationship with, because if they're not sharing basic things like their wage structure, or they're unwilling to do that, or how basically a bill that you're paying is calculated, and what goes into that, that's a different, that would change my mind. Again, you don't want to know, how much the owner is making, what his profit and loss is. I mean, those are personal things, but the basic operational elements, you as a client or a meeting planner can and should ask for that information. And if you're not comfortable with what they're doing, you should look elsewhere. And again, I'm not saying that you should ban a particular state because they pay the federal minimum wage, but we have power as consumers, and particularly lobbying groups can go to state legislatures and can go to the federal government and say, hey, listen, these are important things for us. So operators sometimes and consumer groups sometimes, professional organizations sometimes have to fight for things that they believe in, accept what is happening, but then work to change that later on. And it's easier said than done. I can sit here and preach all day about going to Congress and asking them, to change the minimum wage to $20. Good luck with that. And, that's not part of my daily job. And so all I would say is good luck with that. But again, just circling back to to my original answer is just, communication and, being honest and open with your guests creates a relationship that can really turn into a long-term
Yeah.
thing where you trust and respect each other. And then you'll be more willing to pay when they say, hey, listen, my cost of business went up by 8%, but I'm only charging you 4% more, right? I'm working with you on that, right? I mean,
Right.
those kinds of things matter. And again, is an operator going to provide that level of detail? Maybe, maybe not. But again,
Right.
if I'm your client and I've been your client for 20 years, I would expect, I would expect some, level of relationship that's built on trust and mutual trust.
Right.
So
Exactly. Yeah. And it depends. And it also depends if you're union, if the property's union or
that's right.
non-union, that has a big play into it as well.
That's right. Right.
Um,
Exactly. Right. And
yeah.
and there are some operators that are not unionized that basically they do that intentionally. It's a choice
Mhm.
that they make, and they try to treat their employees in a way that will prevent them from wanting to become unionized. And again, I'm not making a
Right.
statement on whether unions are good or bad, but
Right.
there are viewpoints on how that works and how it affects business. But my general view on all of this stuff is when you treat people well, right, you'll get
Mhm.
more from them, and they'll be less interested in looking for other things, right? That if
Right.
you treat your people well, you pay them a fair wage, and you do the most that you can for them. You try to provide them with benefits when you can, things that are the most meaningful and helpful to them as your team. Then you're doing all you can. And if they're not happy
Right.
with that, then let them go to the somewhere else and look to see if the grass is greener on the other side. And again,
Right.
it's not a statement for or against unionizing. It's a statement for operators and
Yeah.
managers doing a great job of running their businesses and being supportive of their people however they can. That will lead to, I guess, a better workforce
Right.
overall. And again, I'll just separate unions out from that. I don't want to be on the record of being for or
No.
against them in any, not because I don't have an opinion. It's just because I think it's counterproductive.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. Well, no, and even in my former corporate job, I mean, I had my salary, but then every year the company would give us a spreadsheet showing us and educating us as employees of these are all the added benefits we provide you, and this is the value of them.
That's right. That's
And
right.
I think as operators, that's really important to showcase to your employees because a happy employee base means better revenues for you in the long run.
That's right. Well, and like there are little things that you can do that make a huge difference. I have
Mhm.
some friends that run restaurant companies, multi-unit restaurant companies in large cities, and they make a point of actually buying Metro cards for their staff
Mhm.
members that they know would be spending basically, $4 a day or $5 a day on subway rides, and they don't pay for every ride, but they give them a Metro card every month that basically, has a couple $100 in it. It doesn't
Right.
break their back, and the guests and their employees are like, hey, you're helping me get to work in a way that's $200 that I would. So
Mhm.
like those little things, and again, $200, I just made that number up, but
Right.
that could be, whatever amount that is, it's enough to help your employees and to show them that you're committed to that side of the equation, to help them and to help them understand, that you're committed to them and it's part of your DNA that you want to support your staff. There are things you can't
Right.
do. There are other things you can't pay car insurance for your staff, but you could probably you contract with an insurance company to offer them a company plan, assuming you're large enough. If you're a small company,
Right.
a lot of this stuff is really hard to do. But if you're a larger
Right.
company, you can choose those kinds of things. You can provide
Mhm.
daycare allowances. You can do all kinds of things that, like you say, at the end of the day, when you look at it, you're like, oh wow, that saved me X amount of dollars that I would have
Yeah.
normally had to spend, and
Mhm.
that builds trust and
Right.
relationship between the staff and the management. So anyway, I don't know if I
Exactly.
got off track on that, but
Oh, no, I love that conversation because I think it's really important whether you're a restaurant or a hotel to to think about those things because especially in this marketplace, right? And I was just in a session here at the IAC conference about somebody asked a group of students, what are you looking for? And some of them were like, the sustainability, where are you in social justice issues? And can I, depending on the job type, can it be hybrid? And it was nice because some of these two millennials and one a little bit older than her, were like, I want the face-to-face interaction, but I also want the ability to work from home if I can. It's hard in our industry as hospitality to do that in some instances, but one of them said a 4-day work week, so that's maybe doable in some of the positions in a hotel or a convention center, right?
Well,
So
it is, and we've seen it in other places. Like if you take the
mm,
medical profession, for example, a lot of hospital employees, particularly in the ERs, they are on
mhm,
nurses, doctors, orderlies. They're on 4-day schedules. They work four
mhm,
12-hour days, or what, 4 10-hour days, whatever it is, as
right,
opposed to the shorter shifts, and those things are benefits. Some people don't want that the
right,
longer workday is not a benefit to them, but companies, when they can figure that out and hire people that match those particular things, restaurants and hotels, for the most part, know what their volume of business looks like.
mhm,
Generally speaking,
right,
whether restaurants, it's a little bit harder, particularly if you're not 100% reservation based. But for banquet business and catering business, the your guests already selected what they want, when they want it, what you're charging, what they're
right,
getting. Right? So that's
mhm,
easier to manage. But supply and demand for other types of services, restaurant services or food and beverage services, you have you have data that can show you what your trends are like, and it can help you with staffing and all that other
mhm,
stuff to manage that as it comes in.
yep. Okay, so when we're looking at food and beverage operations, is there, I want to ask a dual question here. What do you see as a best practice? And then on the flip side is, what is the negative side of a best practice? Where's the failure? What kind of failures do you see? And what is the cause of those failures?
Yeah,
If that makes
so
sense.
I'm actually, when I look at this and when I look at best practices, I look at it as kind of being conditional, right? Conditional. I mean,
Okay.
being the best at what you do shouldn't be conditional, but what you do and how you do it should be based on the circumstance that you're in. And so I would say that again, I'm just making this up. You have the annual bowling convention in your hotel, right? Those
Uh-huh.
guests are very different than, let's just say, the Academy of Management and academic. You have an academic conference with a bunch of professors,
Mhm.
right? Not that a professor couldn't be a bowler, but again, those would be two very, very different types of guests. And so being
Right.
flexible, being able to understand that there are very, very specific needs that each type of guest has, and creating those experiences for them and around them, I think that's the key to making sure you're differentiating enough across the different types of guests or clients that you serve, but also recognizing that you need to have some consistency, in what you do and what you deliver, so that it's not night and day, and your staff isn't confused that you're going from a low level. This may not be the right descriptor, but a low level or a low budget type of operation to a high level, high
Right.
budget type of operation. I worked, when I was younger, I worked for a country club in Miami, and we basically never did anything other than like 500 plate dinners. That's all we ever did in the banquet department that I worked in, whether it was a wedding or a political event or whatever it was. We were basically just roasting up filet mignon and foie gras all day. That's all we ever did. And so if
Mhm.
someone came and said, "Hey, I want chicken tenders and French fries," we'd be like, "Yeah, well, no, we don't do that." And so every business is going to set the parameters of what they do, and that's how you create value around that. And so there's nothing wrong with French fries and chicken fingers, but that may not meet you can't sell that for $500 a plate. Or if you can, let
Right.
me know who those guests are, and I will open up my own business and start cooking chicken fingers and French fries for them.
Right.
So
Exactly.
those are the little nuances that have to be managed as you move across the various
Right.
types of segments and customers.
So when you're not doing that, where do you see that line of, negativity? What is it? Does it come with communication? I think communication is a huge barrier,
That's
in a lot of ways.
Right.
And actually, I was at this event the other day, and we were asking what was in something, and the three servers there could barely speak English. And so it was hard to understand, to get a communication across of what they were serving.
Right. Yeah. So very simple. Very simple is yes, communication, and I would say no surprises. Right.
Okay.
That no guest or employee should have to deal with any surprises. So if I'm a server, and let's just say English is not my first language, and I'm serving in a primarily English dominated domain, if then as a server, I would be looking for help in how I can provide guests with that information. And so if I'm a manager and I know that guests are going to ask lots of questions about this particular thing, then you provide them with details on a card where they can either read it or they can hand you, here's a little card. The food that you're eating today is X. Here's the ingredient list. You're not going to hand them a recipe, but you can hand them a list of allergens. You can hand them all of those things can and should be available anyway. And so your staff, if you're not teaching them how to communicate that to the guests in a way that they need it, I don't have any food allergies, so I typically don't care about that. But there are guests that have food allergies, or they have nutritional demands or needs and things that need to be accounted for. And so it's a management and a training issue. I never blame a staff member for not having, like, if I ask a staff member and they can't answer that question, I don't blame them. It's not their fault that they can't answer that question. It's their manager's fault or their supervisor's fault for not providing them with the resources to answer those types of questions. And if it's the first time that a question is being asked that they can't answer, great. Well, now it's been asked. So you should basically provide your team with
Right.
with answers. And again, cookie cutter answers sometimes don't work for everything, but a list of ingredients, is there cream in this dish? Someone should be able to say yes or no with very little time
Yeah.
to answer the question. You should be
Hmm.
pull something out and say, oh no, the chicken does not have any cream in it, but the soup does. Right? You should be able
Right.
to look at that, and maybe a guest would need that. I'm sorry, maybe a server would need that in Spanish or in some other
Hmm.
language, so that it makes more sense to them. And so you as a manager, if you're facing those demands from guests that your staff can't perform consistently, that's a training issue, it's a management
Yep.
issue, it's a staffing issue. And so again, I never blame the staff for a bad experience. I may not be happy with the bad experience, but there's always someone who is responsible for their behavior and their actions and their training, and that's who I like to hold accountable, because it doesn't make any sense. And so I'll just give you a personal example. If you're in a restaurant next to my kid and my kid isn't behaving well, don't blame my kid, right? It's my responsibility for me to teach my kids how to behave in public and what to do and what not to do, right?
Hmm.
Are they going to be perfect every time? No, but they need to learn, and it's my responsibility. So don't be mad at my kid for spilling his milk. Be mad at me if
Hmm.
and that's the way I look at it. Maybe that's not the greatest example, because everyone's kids are great, right? Everyone loves their kids, and they're little angels,
Right.
until they're not. So anyway, again, part of my charm is long, convoluted answers, and I hope that I answered your question again in my long,
You did.
convoluted way. Thank you.
No, and I really actually do appreciate the way that you answered that, because it is. And to be honest with you, last week I was at a different convention, and they were giving away drink tickets, and it was a printed drink ticket sponsored by somebody. And I went up to the bar with a drink ticket and I said, "Can I have a sparkling water? Because I don't drink alcohol." And I wanted that. And he's like, "Well, no, you can only get an old fashioned with this drink ticket." And I'm like, "Well, what about the people who are clients of them who don't drink, right?
Right.
Or, I mean, I'm not a recovering alcoholic. I just choose not to drink." And I'm like,
Yeah.
and I got perturbed with the bartender, and then I walked away and I came back and I'm like, "I'm not mad at you. You're the one communicating that message, but I'm taking that to the event and saying, hey, this is, to be honest with you, the sponsor didn't know it was only going to be for that drink." So,
Right. And the other issue too is that like you mentioned, you're not a recovering alcoholic. Well, there are people who
mhm,
don't drink alcohol because they don't like the taste of it. There are people who don't
right,
drink alcohol for religious reasons. So
mhm,
having an event that's set up where you're not accommodating, just general, general needs, that's a design flaw in that event, right?
Mhm.
So someone who created that, maybe it's really cool, like to hand out tickets for an old fashioned, but you might want to have, some fine print in there that's going to allow someone to just get a drink, or you have to pay $2 for for a glass of sparkling water when everyone else is drinking old fashions for free. That doesn't, or as
Mm.
part of that doesn't seem right. And so
Yeah.
again, that poor employee standing there, and again, I wouldn't recommend that an employee basically just say, "Oh, here you go," and give something away, because there's a management accountability side of things, that you tell your staff what to do. And if your staff is just giving away stuff for the sake of giving it away because they don't like a management thing in place, well, that's,
Hmm.
again, that's a bigger problem. So I wouldn't
Right.
suggest, and but I'm a big fan of empowering employees to make decisions to help guests be happy. And so maybe guests are empowered to say, "Hey, you know what, there's some companies like the Ritz-Carlton is famous for this, where they empower their employees. I think I don't know if they've adjusted the number, but I think their employees to help a guest with a negative service experience they're having. You can spend $1,000 to help
Oh, wow.
them, right, to help them
Hmm.
improve their experience. But if you think about it, right, if I'm staying at your hotel, for a Ritz-Carlton hotel, for 3 or 4 days, right, and something isn't right, I'm dropping $1,000 a day. So in effect, what you're telling the employee is, you know what, we want you to make this guest happy, but there's a limit to it, and they can't
Right.
just spend the money without accountability, that they would have to report. Well, Alex Susskind came down to the front desk, and he was really upset because a pipe had burst, in the bathroom. Well, okay, comp my room for the night, because
Right.
that's pretty disruptive. But not having batteries in my remote control, right? Just replace the batteries. I don't need $1,000 off my room night
Right.
because there weren't batteries. Now, should the batteries in the remote control be working? Yes. Should the bathroom be clean? Should all this stuff be? Yes, absolutely. But these things are going to happen. And so empowering your people to help it's just a different management thing that you can do. And like Yum Brands, they own fast food restaurants, KFC and Taco
Hmm.
Bell. They also have a program in place where employees are empowered to basically help satisfy guests that are complaining about things, and they have a certain amount of money that they can spend, but it's not unaccountable. You have to explain what you did and why you did it,
Right.
so that there's a record of it. And that's important, so the employees know that they're accountable to help the guests, but they're also accountable to explaining what they're doing, so that the organization
Right.
can learn from the things that are happening. And so if this is a problem that's occurring all the time, well, it looks like you have to fix the problem rather than just keep on giving compensation to the guests because of the problem, right? So the
Right.
long-term goal for the operator should be to figure out how to fix the problem, but give your staff or your team the opportunities to make whatever adjustments
Right.
they need. But again, I don't want this to be misinterpreted to say, "Oh, just give your employees money to spend," because if every single guest that comes into a Ritz-Carlton hotel, if you're going to discount their rate by $1,000, you will not be in business very long, right? So the idea is that
True.
these should be things that you have in your toolbox to help deliver excellent service,
Mhm.
but you should be delivering excellent service without all these things happening all the time. So I don't know if that
Right.
answered your
Yeah.
question, but it's just kind
Yeah.
of
No.
the way that I look at these types of things, and solving problems is usually a two-stage process. It's one,
Hmm.
fixing the problem at hand for the guest in the moment, because most of the time in restaurants and hotels, those are in the moment complaints, right? You're not
Right.
calling the restaurant 3 weeks later saying, "Oh, by the way, the other day my steak wasn't cooked properly." Like, "Oh, 3 weeks ago you didn't cook my steak properly." You're complaining right now about your steak not being cooked properly. So there's that immediate concern. But then what happened with that steak, and what can we do next time to make sure that,
Right.
or what can we do to make sure that this doesn't happen very often, given that humans are cooking the steak and humans are going to make mistakes, and servers taking orders are going to make mistakes in what they ask for and how they put it into the
Hmm.
system to get cooked. So everyone's going to be making mistakes at some point, but the idea is you minimize that. And so I guess I'm just
Right.
lecturing you now on operational excellence, and I'm sorry about that, but that's kind of what I
Oh,
do.
no, no, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Okay, so two more questions. for
Sure, of
you.
course.
Well, maybe three because I see those nerds behind your head.
Oh
The
yeah.
box of nerds, yeah.
It's almost
Okay,
empty.
so okay. I know where to get what to buy you.
Yeah.
The I was giving a presentation today and talking about the value of audit, but I was really food and beverage auditing, but it was really one of my points is that food and beverage now, I think really, and you talked about this a little bit at the beginning, is people are looking for purpose driven food, right? They
Mm,
want food that, and which kind of ties into those nerds maybe a little bit in the opposite direction, but they want they want to know where the food comes from. They want their food to be healthy for them, or they want it to feel nostalgic, or things like that. So how do you see that being addressed in, and they want it to be good for the earth, right?
yeah.
There's people that want that. So how do you see that being addressed now?
So, there are a couple of things. Again, it comes down to communication, right? So if your clients and your guests are interested in particular things, and again, I'm just making this up. Let's just say that you have a group of people that want nothing but organic food, right? That's all they don't want any.
Mhm.
If you're going to set up a menu for them, everything has to be organic or sustainable, right? That's a business model that you have to figure out
Mhm.
for those particular guests. But there's some middle ground, right, in figuring out how these things work. And a friend of mine who runs a sandwich chain. I won't mention any names. And this question, he was guest lecturing in one of my classes, and students asked a very similar question, Ted. I looked at your menu, and you don't really have anything organic, and there's nothing sustainable, and there's this. And so he said, you know what, you're absolutely right that we actually have a few things on our menu that are organic and sustainable, but we're limited by price point, right? So that organic chicken that you're telling me to buy is roughly 70% more expensive than the non-organic chicken. And I priced my menu and the things that I deliver to my guests based um, on that, right? And so I didn't
Mhm.
factor in organic chicken. I didn't factor in, organic greens and all this other stuff. But I actually have some drinks that are organic. I have some chips that are organic. I have some, other things that are
Mhm.
organic. But if you're paying $7 for a meal, right? I can't give you everything organic. I just can't. And so
Mhm.
the students when they heard that, they're like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. But as
Mhm.
long as everyone knows, right, if you go to sandwich shop X, you know that it's not organic. Or let's just, again, I'll mention a brand name, Chipotle, right? They talk about great ingredients, fresh ingredients, prepared in-house. They talk about sustainable and humane treatment of animals and all that other stuff. Those are all things that you can do that might increase the price of doing or the cost of doing business. But Chipotle with 2,000 units, right? Could they sell organic chicken or organic steak in their in their restaurants? They probably could, but again, there's a cost to doing that, and you
Right.
need to make sure that when you do those things, that it's getting back to the value proposition, that your guests are demanding it and they're willing to pay for it. Then you can do it. If your guests are demanding a Rolls Royce, but they want to pay for a Chevrolet, right? There's a disconnect, right?
Right.
Someone is not communicating properly with with each other to make sure that everything's right, because no one is happy if you're expecting a Rolls Royce to have a Chevrolet pull up in front of you. And again, not that there's anything wrong with the Chevrolet, but it's not a Rolls Royce, and you can do whatever
Right.
you want to a Chevrolet. It's not going to be a Rolls Royce. And so as long as everyone's clear on that, I think you have fewer problems or concerns. And
Yeah.
it goes back to everything I've been saying. Basically, it's about communicating. And
Yeah.
what you do and what you're not going to do, because then your guests and your clients will at least know where you stand on these things. And
Right.
say, restaurant X is not for the environment because they don't have this. Is actually, I am for the environment, and I do other things to support the environment.
Mhm.
I invest in
Right.
this, or I'm carbon neutral now, or I don't know if you noticed on the roof, I've got some solar panels that I put up there that hadn't been there before. So I'm doing things, I'm doing what I can. And and that's my philosophy. And then if you don't agree with me, or you're looking for something else, well then that's the great thing about at least our capitalistic democratic society that we're a part of, is that you have lots of choices. So Hotel X
Mhm.
doesn't do what you want, there's Hotel Y or Hotel Z, or you pick a letter, there are, hundreds, if not thousands of
Yeah.
them to choose from, depending on, on where you are. So
Yeah.
I hope that answered your
Exactly.
question.
It did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Good.
I think that's really important. And okay, so my two final questions. What does safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experience mean to you?
Well, to me personally, it just means being true to who you are. Right. And so I think that it's not something that you can generalize. And I'll use my family for an example. My wife, she calls herself plant powered. She eats a little bit of fish and she eats some eggs, and her world revolves around being, basically plant powered. And she thinks that's better for the environment. I, on the other hand, am meat powered. And, so for every mushroom she's eating, I'm eating a piece of bacon, right? So we're, in our household, we're kind of in equilibrium well, maybe not. I eat way more bacon than she eats mushrooms, but that's beside the point. But so we're in equilibrium. And so what I would say is that you need to define what's important to you, and then you can find businesses that you support. You can find things that you do in your community to support that and to do that. So I battle every day with my children to turn the lights off in the house, right? When they're not using it, because it's better for the environment, right? I mean, it's also better for my utility bill, but I'm not going to tell them that, right? And so you get to make decisions about what's important to you. And I would argue, if I had a list of 50 people or in front of me, and I asked them that same question, I would probably get close to 50 very different answers for very different reasons. And so I'm not trying to avoid the question. I'm just trying to say that I think it's really nuanced, and to each person it means a totally different thing. And businesses that understand that, I think, will always be better off than businesses that don't. And businesses that try to force someone to do something, or to, like, again, I'll give you another example. We had this vegetarian restaurant in town, and I don't really want to mention any names because it's not really nice, but they're a nationally famous restaurant located in Ithaca, New York, known for vegetarian cooking. And so anyone can Google that; they can probably find the name of it, but I'm not going to mention it. I've been there a few times, and they are very militaristic about their vegetarianism. Right? They're judgmental in ways. Like, I sat down and I asked for a Diet Coke, and they're like, "Well, we don't do that. We only have natural soda." I'm like, "Okay, well, that's fine." They made me feel bad about ordering a Diet Coke, and maybe as a consumer, I was uninformed about the nuances of everything that they do, but they made me feel uncomfortable about that. So the idea is, right, maybe I'm not the right consumer for that restaurant, but while I'm there, sitting there, and I ask for a Diet Coke, say, "You know what, we don't have any diet soda, but we have this or we have that." We'd be, as opposed to, "We don't do that, and you asking is offending me." It's like, really? Like, I'm beyond that. And I'm a service provider through and through, and I believe in helping people and being nice to people and not judging people based on the choices that they make. And if you want to eat nothing but tofu for the rest of your life, I'm all for it. Come to my restaurant. I will cook you nothing but tofu, right? Assuming that I can do that. If you want to eat nothing but bacon for the rest of your life, I'm fine with that too. So,
Right.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I
Yeah.
don't know if that answered your question directly, but in terms of conservation and recycling and all of those things, everyone does it in a different way. We compost at our home, and it's my job. Every Sunday, there's a place where we drop it off. So I have this big stinky bucket that I put in the back of my car every Sunday, and I dump it in, and we collect the stuff all week. And that's what we do. I have an electric car, right? Well, it's a hybrid, so it's part electric. When I'm in Ithaca, I don't use any gas, but when I have to leave, drive more than 25 miles, I need to, click on the on the gas. And so everyone has their own things that they do. Am I carbon neutral? No. The amount of beef I eat completely knocks any of those other things that I mentioned off the table, because it's terrible for the environment. But we all choose our vices, right? Just like people choose to drink or not. Alcohol is good or bad for you. You make those decisions every day.
Exactly.
Right? Or for me, it's every morning.
Okay, so Well, and in the South, bacon's on everything as well. So it is. All right. So because of the nerds are back there, I do want to. My question that I typically ask a lot of people is, "What is your favorite food and drink?" And so you said that nerds box is almost empty. Is that your favorite food?
So I
Or
have a really weird sweet tooth. I love
uh,
sugar candy, like things
mhm.
like Mike and Ike's and Nerds and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Like I'm all in on that all the time. And so yeah, and so people who know me kind of know that that's what I'm about. And if you say, "Oh,
Mhm.
what's my favorite meal?" And very simply, I mean, I like all kinds of food. I've been all around the world. I'm a lucky man. I've seen a lot of things and tasted a lot of things, but there's nothing to me like a really, really good steak, a really, really good order of French fries, and a nice glass of red wine to go with it. Like if that
Okay.
I could eat that every day and be a happy camper.
Okay.
But there are plenty. I love Mexican food. I love Italian food. I've never met a pizza I didn't like. Those kinds of things. But if
Right.
you had to ask me so my weakness is basically not chocolate, but basically sugar candy, which is horrible for you. And unfortunately, and knock on wood, I'm not a diabetic at the moment, but I may be working toward that. If I chug those nerds all the way down, that might be the end of me. But most people ask, and like what type of cuisine? Because I used to cook for a living. What type of food did you like to cook the most? I said, I just like to cook food that people like to eat. And so if you like something and I can make it taste good for you, that's all I ever like to do. And that's kind of the way I am when I like to eat. I like to eat things that taste good, that are interesting. And I never say no to anything, but there's only one food that I don't like. And I don't
What
know
is that?
why. It's olives. I
Oh, I
never
don't like them either.
Oh yeah,
No. Yeah.
I've never been able to like them and enjoy them. And
Mm-mm.
people always told me different things. Oh well, what about an olive in a martini? I'm like, well, I like the
Uh-uh.
martini part, but I don't like the olive part, right? So
Hmm.
so there are particular things. But people are like, well, you eat liver and you eat onions. I'm like, yeah. There's just something about olives I don't like, and so
I
everyone
agree.
has their own little things. But
Hmm.
other than that, I was just in Shanghai, and I for the first time I ate pig brains, and people say, well,
Oh,
what do pig
wow.
brains? Yeah, what do pig brains taste like? I'm like chicken. I was kidding. It was really flavorful the way they were cooked, but the
Hmm.
texture was weird. And I don't know if you've ever had like sweetbreads, the thymus gland of a cow.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
Again, or veal. It's very, there's like this weird texture to it, but the
Hmm.
flavors are great. And so that kind of stuff, I'm always experimenting, and I never say no to anything except for olives. And you know what? If
Okay.
I accidentally get some olives in my food, I keep my mouth shut, and I just either push them aside, or I eat them just to be a good trooper, in a setting
Right.
where it wouldn't be appropriate for me to, say I don't like olives.
Or
So
spit them out. Yes,
yeah,
exactly. Alex, sorry. Thank you so much.
oh, my
Everyone,
pleasure.
this is Alex Susskind. He is a professor of food and beverage management and senior director of academic programs at the Nolan Hotel School at Cornell. Um, I'm going to show everybody here. This is how to get a hold of that school and find you at
Yeah.
Cornell. Any way else to find you?
Sure. You can type in my email address. It's actually pretty simple. It's alex.suskind at
Hmm.
cornell.edu. And
Oh,
if
that's
you
super
put in the
easy.
subject line, that's just something so that it doesn't, if I don't know who you are, it doesn't mean I'm going to delete your message. But if you put
Hmm.
something in the subject line, related to the podcast, I'll know, you're reaching out, and I know that you have a
Great.
question, or you just want to say something or tell me I'm right or wrong. I appreciate a healthy debate
Yeah.
at any time as well. And so anyone who wants to reach out, by all means, please do that. And it's been my pleasure to be here today and chat with you.
Thank you, Alex, so much. And thank you for educating individuals who are going to be coming into our industry of food and beverage and hospitality. It's really important. So,
It's a great
yeah,
career, and it's a great
it really
business.
is.
And as
Yeah,
far as I can see, it's not going anywhere until robots take over the world. But I can
exactly.
pretty much say I will be long gone when that happens, and I'm not upset about that.
Okay. Oh my goodness, I love it. Thank you so much. All right, so everybody, thank you for listening. And this is the Eating at a Meeting podcast using StreamYard, and we're here every Wednesday. And next week, I'm actually going to introduce you to A gentleman in the UK who just won an award for IAC for his food waste management and what they're doing there to help with that. So stay tuned for next Wednesday, same time, same bat channel, and I'll see you then. Stay safe and eat well.